So Adrian's our account executive. So last year, the people that were here would have met Elise. Elise moved on, and we were lucky enough to get Adrian. And how long ago was Stripe Tuor?
Just like about a month ago.
A month ago, but we asked Adrian to speak before then, but I was at Stripe Tuor in Sydney a month ago, realised Stripe was 10 years old and Ubi Park's 10 years old, and felt that we probably were catching up as much as on what Stripe was actually doing, and actually to see all the amazing stuff Stripe was doing, thought it would be a good idea, especially in the AI space, to add that to today. But as we sort of talked about with Microsoft and other partners that we've spoken about today, we've selected Stripe for a number of different reasons, and I would say Stripe's not the most cheapest product, but I think it's all the hidden costs, as Will said to me again, around what you pay, and we were pushed by the developers to go with Stripe because of how great it is to develop to and how well documented things are and performs to a very high standard and works. And we first talked to Stripe after having an opportunity in New Zealand that our previous payments provider couldn't go to, and that's how we got started with Stripe. But we had a real key customer in Mount Hotham have some real problems with reconciliation of reporting around refunds, and that was coming through the data we were getting back from our last provider, and was causing them a lot of grief because they were reporting back as a government agency, especially around the COVID times, and was also then causing us a lot of grief because we were having to do all sorts of stuff to get these reports and get the data right so it would actually reconcile on the platform. We moved to Stripe, and the next year we didn't have any problems, so that was good. So I'll let you, Adrian, give us a bit of a rundown of what's happening in the world of Stripe.
Hope this works. Yep. Great, that's a little bit low, that's all right. Hi everyone, my name's Adrian and I'm an existing business account executive here at Stripe, as Moss said, which means I basically look after existing users, including Ubi Park, from a strategic and commercial perspective. So I'm kind of excited here today to talk to you about demystifying payments, which I know is a bit of a kind of a broad term, but what I kind of mean by that is focusing on today would be like giving you insights or a peek under the hood of Stripe, looking a bit at what the data is that we collect and trying to give you, really useful insights about how you can use that to optimize your payments or how our businesses that we have optimize their payments, as well as just some more general insights. So this will mostly be focused on a bit of data today as opposed to the AI side, but I'll try and touch on some AI as well. I've been in payments for about 7 years across banking and now fintech in Australia and the US. So I'm a bit of a payments nerd, but hopefully you kind of find this data as interesting as I did by putting together this presentation. So just in case you don't know who Stripe is, a bit of an overview. Stripe's a financial technology company with a full suite of payments and financial automation solutions. We work with businesses of all sizes, so that's from the startups all the way up to multinational enterprises. Fundamentally, I'd say that we kind of obsess about payments so that our customers don't have to. As Moston said, we like to try and make life easier for our customers and kind of take away those inefficiencies internally on their side by kind of doing it on our side as the best-in-class solution, providing that best-in-class solution. Because we want our customers focused on what's important to them, which is essentially growing their business. So I mean, as you see here, there's essentially 3 areas that we break the Stripe platform into, and that's our global payments, which is payments and essentially making those as frictionless and as easy as possible while also mitigating fraud. We have embedded payments and finance, which is kind of our solution essentially for multi-party platforms looking to start, scale and grow their payments. So this is kind of the way to think about this is kind of the automated kind of payment flows of businesses such as Amazon, Uber, Xero and Shopify. You can probably imagine that it's quite complicated to pay the driver for Uber while also paying Uber, while also paying Stripe their fees. So all of that's kind of managed through this embedded payments section. And then finally, revenue and finance automation, which is focused on automating manual processes, eliminating the inefficiencies of legacy finance tools, and supporting revenue growth. So this can be like helping you pay your tax in the US, or recurring subscriptions through our billing solution. So as Mostyn said, we actually just celebrated our 10th anniversary in Australia. Stripe was founded in 2010 in San Francisco, but it's been in Australia since 2014. And coincidentally, UB Park is also 10 years old, so congrats to UB Park on celebrating its 10 incredible years of transforming the parking industry. As Stripe's been operating in Australia for 10 years, I thought it might be a good place to start by quickly looking at some interesting stats on how payments ecosystem has changed over the past decade. So, in 2014, there were 280,000 new businesses created in 2014, there were 280,000 new businesses created in Australia. At that time, 6% of all retail sales were online, and around about 50% of cash payments in Australia were made by cash. Compare that to now, where 400 new businesses were created in Australia, so quite a big jump there. And we also see now that 18% of all retail sales are now done online, and cash has dramatically fallen to about 13%, which is actually lower than, I guess, the payments that are going online, which I'm not sure if that's linked, but it's kind of an interesting stat, I think. But what about how payments, or what about how kind of Australians like to pay? So card usage across generations looks kind of wildly different. Today, credit card usage among Gen Z is at 42%, far lower than the 71% among Gen X. Instead, they're actually using things like buy now, pay laters, which you've probably heard of, which were basically just getting started a decade ago. I don't know if you know a lot about buy now, pay laters, but there's a whole ecosystem out there of them, all with their own geographic footprint, their specific specializations. You've got Affirm, Klarna, Zip, I'm sure you've heard of them, but really they are being used quite a lot by the kind of the youth of today. Real-time payments barely existed in 2014. Today, real-time payments are becoming increasingly common in the world's largest economies. We have Pix in Brazil, we've also got UPI in India, and then there's also the new payments platform here in Australia. So that's Osco, PayID, which you probably use, and now Pay2 is just starting to kind of become available, which is basically the replacement for direct debit payments. Crypto was basically, I don't want to say non-existent, but crypto was in its infancy in 2014, whereas today we have governments conducting live experiments with digital currencies and central bank digital currencies to create new unified standards for cross-border payments. And 10 years ago, embedded financial services were just starting to take off. Today, dozens of companies like Shopify, BigCommerce, and Xero actually make the majority of their revenue from the financial services that they offer on their platform. So in fact, you might not realize, but Shopify actually makes more than 50% of its revenue from its embedded financial services rather than building the websites or paying SaaS fees. And that's basically mostly from transaction fees that they charge for payment processing through those websites. So personal preferences have changed over these years. It's basically resulted in an explosion of payment methods in the last decade. We have the wallets now, buy now, pay laters, and various local payment methods. Despite increasing globalization, it's pretty clear that payments are local. So that's when I say that, I mean that payments are very, very personal to each person in each country. Stripe itself has moved in just 1 year from offering about 50 payment methods. So that was essentially last year we're offering 50 payment methods to offering 100 payment methods now. But more payment methods can also mean kind of more decisions for businesses and can potentially more complexity for businesses as well as they expand. Which is kind of it's clear that many of the most important growth opportunities, at least in Stripe's perspective, are on getting payments right. But it can be hard to identify exactly how businesses can optimize their payments in order to drive this growth. And that's kind of where Stripe comes in. Millions of global companies trust Stripe as their partner for financial infrastructure, including UB Park. In Australia alone, we support over 500,000 businesses. We also processed more than $1 trillion globally last year, or, and I like this stat quite a lot, to put that in perspective, that's about 1% of the world's GDP. And that percentage in Australia is actually higher. We heard that in Australia, I've been told in Australia it's actually more like 2.4% of Australia's GDP is processed through Stripe, which is a pretty crazy stat for me. Kind of all that's to say that here at Stripe we have like access to like a pretty large wealth of data to run kind of powerful experiments on this data to kind of share rich insights about what you should be doing with payments and how to optimize your payments. So this is kind of like what I wanted to focus on most of this presentation, or the rest of this presentation on today, is kind of giving you a peek under the hood of Stripe and what the data around payment tells us so that you can be making these kind of data-driven decisions. So let's take a look at a few experiments to show you in practice how our data helps our customers optimize their payments. Let's start with the express checkout. We all want, I guess, checkout to be fast when we're checking out, right? So people tell us that they expect online checkout experience to be no longer than 10 seconds. That's pretty fast. However, we've surveyed hundreds of e-commerce websites and we found that the average checkout time was actually more than 3 minutes, which is a pretty large gap in the world of the internet. There are many things that add up to a less efficient checkout. You have lack of autofill, inability to reuse payment methods, no addressed auto-suggest. This is just kind of to name a few. However, the easiest recommendation to improve the checkout process and drive conversion, in Stripe's opinion, would probably just be skip that checkout process entirely. So kind of, I guess the way I think about this and the way I like to think about it is kind of think about the kind of how many times you found a product that you love or think you love, and then saw that Apple Pay or Google Pay, and saw Apple Pay, Google Pay there, and just hit buy now from the product page rather than going through the checkout process. Express checkout options make online payments frictionless. On the other hand, maybe think of how many times you've been on a checkout page with no save card details, or like your wallet's in the other room and you can't be bothered to get off the couch, which has happened to me. So you decide not to buy that new jacket, or say not to buy those new set of golf clubs. And then you can kind of imagine that across your entire potential customer base and just how much that's missed opportunity or missed kind of revenue uplift. This might feel kind of obvious, but you'd be surprised how many businesses are yet to offer these easy options. Our latest data shows the number of businesses on Stripe using one-click checkouts is still well below where it should be. Around half of them are using it in Australia, and New Zealand's actually lagged slightly behind that, which is kind of pretty wild because the conversions, or the uplift is essentially there for the taking. It's pretty easy to, it's very easy to implement. In fact, Stripe's optimized checkout suite, we see an overall increase of 11.9% in revenue when a business moves to it, and like fundamentally that's just because we're offering all these payment types, or we're offering currencies in all these different countries. And there's a few other reasons, but that's probably one of the main largest reasons that we see this uplift. To break that down a little bit further, businesses that offered Apple Pay saw a 10% average conversion uplift. What's more, across Apple Pay, Google Pay, and Stripe's own one-click checkout offering, which is called Link, you might want to add it. The median checkout duration is more than 3 times faster than traditional card form. Leveraging express checkout, I would say, is probably like the #1 thing merchants can do today to optimize their payments experience. In fact, our data science team ran an A/B experiment on Link, which is again our internal one-click checkout. And when Link was offered, businesses saw existing user conversion increase by 14%. So if you kind of think about that, that's even businesses who already have many returning customers are actually still getting meaningful conversion benefits by having these one-click checkout options. The next thing I wanted to talk about was about kind of localization and why it should, I guess, matter to you and why it should matter to businesses. Businesses that invest in localization of their payment methods see, again, a significant uplift in payments volume. A great example of this is the buy now, pay laters that I mentioned earlier. We get a lot of questions from customers about whether buy now, pay laters might come at like a higher cost to your business or kind of cannibalize your existing payments. They want to ensure, they basically want to ensure that there's no risk of this cannibalization to existing volumes or higher checkout friction when you enable these payment methods. To give you more of the data you need to kind of maybe make these strategic decisions, Stripe's run we've run this like A/B test basically on 150,000 global payment sessions. And what we found is, well, on the question of are BNPLs cannibalizing from other low-cost payment methods, or are they actually reaching new customers, our results overwhelmingly prove positive in the sense that more than 2/3 of BNPL volume came from net new sales, suggesting that customers only completed these transactions because the buy now, pay later offering was offered, rather than basically cannibalizing any existing sales that might have occurred. Our second question was, are buy now, pay laters only relevant for big ticket purchases? And our test revealed that that's also not quite true, and this is the one I probably found maybe most surprising. The median transaction amount for a buy now, pay later is actually $70. Businesses with higher price points generally see a little bit more uplift, but all businesses saw a relative conversion uplift of around 10% with buy now, pay laters. Businesses using BNPLs on Stripe also saw a 14% overall revenue increase from higher conversions and these higher order values as well. As I mentioned earlier, this incremental revenue mostly comes probably from Gen Z, from like younger people who use this mostly. And they're using these buy now, pay laters for nearly everything, from grocery shopping to paying their bills, to probably paying maybe their parking fees in the future as well. The other thing I kind of want to talk about quickly was real-time payments. This is a global trend, and it's fast becoming the most popular way to make payments in the world's largest economies. Today, Stripe offers a number of real-time payments around the world, such as Pix in Brazil and PromptPay in Thailand. But in the next section, I wanted to kind of talk about the latest real-time offering in Australia, which is Pay2, which I mentioned a little bit earlier. And I'll also touch on FPOS least cost routing, which maybe FPOS sounds a little bit old, but there's still some interesting value to be found there. So BECS direct debit is kind of the pool payment debit and credit settlement system in Australia since 1989, which is before I was born. So in payment years, that's pretty ancient. While BECS has been a safe and reliable payment method, it's definitely not kind of the payment method of the future. And it definitely has some shortcomings. Longer settlement speed and lack of feedback for merchants when something goes wrong. So now we have the modern alternative, which is Pay2. And Pay2 is actually something we're kind of pretty excited about here at Stripe, as we're all kind of payment nerds. Pay2 offers real-time, merchant-initiated pool payments and has some pretty exciting innovations for merchants and customers. Businesses with reoccurring payment needs, like memberships, subscriptions, utilities, they stand to benefit most from Pay2. Payment status confirmation is instant, unlike BECS, and it's often a lower cost alternative to cards. And with surcharging here, that's kind of probably a little bit more, it's quite useful. Additionally, payment agreements come with a multi-factor authentication, which will vastly reduce the incidences of fraud. I would say Pay2 is probably the next big thing to be aware of in payments in Australia. Pay2 is a great fit for businesses who are looking to kind of lower the cost of acceptance for cards. But if Pay2 isn't an option for your business, then probably FPOS definitely is. It might sound like a bit of a blast from the past, as I said, but actually it's kind of an offering in Australia we should be immensely proud of, considering the benefits it gives consumers and also businesses as well. Least cost routing, as the name suggests, is basically when a customer makes a payment with their dual network card. So I mean, like when they have a Visa card with FPOS logo on the back, least cost routing will actually send that payment along the FPOS rails wherever possible. This is basically to lower the cost of accepting a card. This kind of represents a significant potential saving for your business. FPOS actually cuts the cost of acceptance in half for most merchants on our cost plus pricing structure. And we have like brands like Uber, Stan, and Airtasker. They're all leveraging least cost routing in their businesses with Stripe. Another company you might have heard of who are utilizing it are Canva, who've routed large volumes through FPOS, and that's actually gained them about a 25 basis points in savings on their kind of payment fees. So we kind of covered some individual payment methods, but let's kind of zoom out a little bit and look at what the data tells us more around when expanding into other markets and kind of global expansion, which I think Mostyn mentioned moving into the US, so it's kind of probably top of mind. So if you want to sell internationally, accepting local preferences is critical to reaching new customers. We found that an astounding 85% of customers will abandon their cart if their preferred payment method isn't offered. It's not kind of hard to guess maybe what happens. The customers kind of begin to doubt the legitimacy of the site or the safety of the offering, or they're just turned off maybe of the extra fees the card kind of costs them to pay by that method. And they actually may never return to that website if they know that it doesn't offer their preferred way to pay. I got some examples here which are kind of interesting, I think. So among Stripe users in the Netherlands, 74% of customers prefer to pay by Ideal, which is a local payment method in the Netherlands. In Brazil, 39% choose to pay by Pix. And in North America, 51% of consumers are more likely to complete a purchase if a buy now, pay later is offered. Another one that's not up here that I kind of find personally interesting is OXXO Pay in Mexico, where you can actually buy items online in cash. So you buy an item, you print a voucher, you take the voucher to your local convenience store, go to an OXXO, and you give that voucher, pay by cash, and then the product is shipped from Amazon or whoever who's paying it. So there's a lot of diverse ways to pay, and these are just like a few examples of all the offerings, all the different ways to pay around the world. So we've also found that presenting local currency drives better conversion and lowers decline rates and auth errors. You've always been able to present in just about every currency on Stripe, but the hard part has kind of been determining what the right converted amount should be. We've actually built this tool called adaptive pricing and dynamic payment methods to surface the most relevant payment methods based on transaction amount, browser, and currency. It's important to note that most local payment methods like Ideal, Swish, and Revolut Pay, if you've heard of that one, they're only available in the local currency, so you can't actually offer these methods unless you're offering it in the local currency. And our data shows there are a significant checkout page conversion uplift to be made by offering these local currencies. I'd say this is kind of where Stripe's helped many global businesses, and arguably it's one of the reasons we've actually been kind of so successful over the past 10 or 15 years. With Stripe, you only need one integration to offer over 100 different payment methods globally, and that's basically out of the box. So now I thought we'd kind of turn my attention to maybe something a little bit less glamorous, although I don't know if the rest of it was that glamorous, but the less glamorous aspects of getting payments right is reliability. Reliability might not be the most glamorous thing to talk about, but even the briefest of system outages in payments can have major repercussions. It probably seems like only yesterday that millions were affected by the CrowdStrike outage, which impacted everything from supermarkets to airlines. I'm not sure if any of you were stuck in an airport because of it. More than 4,000 flights were cancelled globally due to the outage, and airlines around the world had to deal not just with angry customers, but also some serious financial losses too. The total predicted loss from the CrowdStrike outage is roughly $15 billion. So this is kind of what's at stake when critical infrastructure systems go down. And Stripe kind of fundamentally believes that reliability isn't a nice to have, but it's kind of the foundation of what we've built everything on. So any business, from large to small, is kind of sensitive to the smallest of outages. So we're pretty zealous about our commitment to leading the industry in reliability while processing, as I said, like 1% of the global GDP. It becomes even critical over things like holiday seasons, or the holiday season's around the corner, or during last year's Black Friday and Cyber Monday, Stripe processed $18.6 billion in transactions. We had over 30,000 Stripe users achieve their highest and best sales day, with our volume peaking at 93,000 transactions per minute. And even with this load, we maintained a 99.999% system uptime, or we call it 5 nines here. So it's essentially the equivalent of our API being unavailable for about 30 seconds per month. So I mean, why is this what does that have to do with optimizing payments, I guess? Well, research shows that 40% of customers whose payment is declined will abandon that business entirely. This is why payments being the most reliable component of your business is so critical to us. Stripe operates at 30% capacity, so ensuring the ability to scale up immediately to handle spiking traffic. So whether that's running a surprise sale or planning for Black Friday, or as was the case earlier this year with Stan getting subscriptions for the Olympics, we try to make sure we can handle that spiking traffic. So my last section is I wanted to touch on that AI and machine learning part of this as well. So Stripe is investing heavily in the payments journey, and when it comes to AI and machine learning, we're also utilizing those tools. Our machine learning models are trained on millions and billions, or actually, I guess it says here trillions of payment volume. So we use those trillions of payment volume. We actually use AI to automatically present the right payment method to our customers or our customers' customers at the right time. And this is used to maximize conversion. So these machine learning models take into things like the location of the buyer, the currency, the device type they're using, and even subtle things like the commerce patterns in your sector. We might present a different payment method up front versus someone who's coming for a different website will present another payment method. We actually even look at past buying behavior of these customers who might have used the Stripe network before to then present what they've previously used. So in doing this, Stripe's machine learning based payment method presentment results in we see it result in about a 3% uptick in conversion. Along with this 3% uptick in conversion, we also see a 7% increase in the average transaction value. So I think this is pretty interesting. So by presenting the right payment methods, more users are buying, and they're also buying more. Another thing we're also using AI in quite heavily, and which is basically our our fraud prevention tool, which is Radar. So Radar is essentially trained on billions of transactions across the Stripe network, and it does so with a high level of precision, and it correctly clears over 99.9% of legitimate charges. But importantly, using AI to handle fraud, we've seen that it does this while also not increasing the declines or the false positives you might see from being too restrictive with your fraud prevention tools. I also want to mention AI reporting. So we actually have a powerful tool here at Stripe called Sigma, which is available to our customers. And this is an AI tool it's there to basically give our users access to their own data without them having to learn any code. So I think we've heard this a little bit before about typing in just regular questions and getting an answer. So instead of using SQL coding to get access to specific or targeted insights, with Stripe Sigma, you just use your natural language, you ask it a question, and similar to ChatGPT, you type it in, and you'd get an answer. So this data can be pretty interesting as well. For most of our users, we basically handle all their revenue data. So which customers are buying what, for how much, who's retaining and churning their subscriptions, or as seen here, just how many customers you might have in France. You just ask it the questions, it'll spit out the code, you can give that to Stripe, we'll put it into the Sigma tool, and we'll get you the report. But essentially the options are limitless. So I've spoken a lot about data and uplift and payment conversion and localization, but I wanted to leave you probably with some key takeaways or questions that maybe you should be asking internally, or maybe even asking your payments provider, your existing payments provider, or maybe even especially if that payment provider isn't Stripe. So I drilled this down to 4 questions. The first one is, how much time and resources, how much internal time and resources are you spending on payments, and could this be better spent elsewhere? what are your payment authorization rates and how do we improve them? Even a 1% increase in payments coming through your website is, fundamentally or essentially a 1% increase in the revenue coming into your website. So if you look at that optimized checkout suite, which optimizes payments, if a 12% increase is what you get by moving to that, that's a 12% increase essentially in the revenue coming through that website. Are we offering all the latest localized payment methods that our customers desire? I think I spoke quite a bit about this, but the world is fragmented. Payments are actually quite local. You really should be offering, offering the payment method that your customer wants to pay you by. And finally, are we thinking about payments as a revenue generator or just a cost center? So this is kind of a different way of thinking about payments, but I feel like historically payments has always been something you just spend money on and it's a cost center. You don't think about it too much, but hopefully I kind of demonstrated through this presentation that the way Stripe thinks about it and the way we like to kind of encourage our users or customers to think about it is actually as a revenue generator. For every percentage we can increase your conversion or every way we can optimize your payments, that's money in the door for you, and that's what we want to see. So if you want more information, I've put my email up here. Feel free to reach out to me at adrianft@stripe.com. I'm actually flying to the US tonight, but I will be back a week from now. And then, thank you. If there's any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
No, thanks, Adrian. Let's give Adrian a round of applause. I might just start off a little bit around some of the payment options we're now considering. And after being at Stripe Tuor a month ago and seeing the stat around, is it Generation Z these days? Is that what we're calling them?
I think that's what it's called.
And I'm going to get these. Did you have those stats in there? I can't remember if I saw them or not.
Was it?
It was something like 72% of Gen X are spending money on credit cards, and that dropped to about 45% for Gen Z, somewhere around that.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go. 71, 42, pretty close. And that started to make me think, do we need to offer a buy now, pay later option in parking? And then is there any use cases in parking that we could see it? So we actually have found one. Manhotham offer a season permit over, it's around an $800 permit that's purchased for the season, and you can drive up and park in the car parks up there at any time you want. So we think that they might get an uplift, especially in the younger generation, of maybe people purchasing that and then paying it off over time. So there was one. And then Pay 2 is that we heard about Pay 2 last year, and it's definitely on our radar as an offer, so people can pay direct from their bank account for that transaction, but it gives us that real-time information the credit card does. So we can then do our automation of blocking a failed payment and not letting the user into the car park next time they come in. So and then that reduces the costs back to you guys as our customers. So that's some of the things we're looking at. Is there any questions for Adrian? Richard.
Just a quick one.
Yep.
I guess, do you know why? I guess Gen Z seems to be more leaning towards buy now, pay later, as opposed to other generations.
That's because their dads are telling them to do something that they're not doing.
Yeah, I kind of wish I was Gen Z and I could tell you, but I'm actually one of the 62% of millennials who use credit cards. I think it's just a way of delaying the pain would be my guess. But I think there's a bit of a misconception that maybe they're being irresponsible with it and they're using it to basically putting it, push down the line and then not paying it off. But I think they're just using it the way we would use a credit card, and they're just basically managing their money in a different way. If I think back to when I was younger, if I was kind of going to a music festival that was like $1,000 for, or $600 for a ticket, and I'm a university student, I would much prefer to pay that in 4 installments rather than have just had to have saved up and actually given a huge chunk of my money, 6 months in advance to the actual festival occurring, or even plane tickets as well if you can do it on those. So I think I don't want to say they're being irresponsible, and I think that's kind of what's the kind of, maybe there's impressions that buy now, pay laters are irresponsible for young people to use. I think it is just them actively managing their money, and it's similar to maybe lay-by as well that people used to use at supermarkets or at Big W, wherever they used to offer it.
Credit card providers, what are they doing to actually to offset these trends that are going the wrong way?
Yeah, don't quote me on personal opinion, but just increasing the interchange and charging more fees. I think they are offering things. I mean, I think MasterCard has its one-click checkout, things like that. So they are kind of expanding outside of just pure cards. I don't think credit cards are going anywhere. Maybe the actual physical card won't exist, but people still want to use them. I think that the points systems people get, the frequent flyer points, I think that's still very lucrative. I mean, personally, I love my Qantas points and chucking everything on credit card, even though I know I'm paying for it kind of at the till. But so I don't think they're going to go anywhere, but definitely they're probably going to have a harder time convincing younger people to sign up to credit cards when they seem to be reasonably happy just using these buy now, pay laters that they have access to.
Any more questions? Well, we might let Adrian go and catch a plane to the States. Thanks very much, mate. I really appreciate you making the time.
I appreciate you inviting me.